Hey there, comic book fans. I am here today to bring you another contest entry. This one into Bigeez contest. From the forgotten borough of Staten Island he's on. For those of you who aren't from the New York City area, Staten Island always gets forgotten when talking about New York City. But anyway, he had a question which was simple for a lot of people, but complicated for me. He asked which 5 or 10 books would you send to, or would you send, or do you have next to send to CGC or some such to get graded? And being that I'm not much of a back issue collector, I've kind of missed out on the whole CGC era, so I have no CGCs and I have no plans to get any CGC slabbed books. But it made me think about, if I were to get some, which ones would they be? Which of course led me to thinking about, why does anyone get anyone CGC'd? And I came up with a few reasons why anyone would get anything CGC'd. The first, of course, being money. If you want to sell stuff, CGC'd books bring in more money, and make it easier to buy and sell especially the high-end comics. Turns your comic into a commodity that's easier to exchange with someone. So I don't have a ton of comics that are worth anything. I don't have a ton of comics that I'd like to sell. Well, one that did pop into my mind is Iron Man 55, because I have 2 of them. Now, they're nothing special. One is better than the other. That one's got water stains on the back. This one of them is clearly in worse condition than the other. This one's condition isn't so bad. It's got some decent corners and looks okay on the back too. No water stains or anything. So I guess I would send this one to get CGC'd, because why send the bad one? But I don't even know where I remember getting one copy of this way back when, in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was collecting the Jim Starlin Thanos stuff, his Captain Marvel, Warlock, and this is kind of where it started. And I remember getting one way back then, but I don't remember ever getting 2. I must have got it somewhere around that same time, but don't even remember it. Because believe it or not, there was a time when Thanos was a minor villain who no one really cared about. Matter of fact, I think it took a long time for Thanos to become a major Marvel villain. Even, what was the first miniseries? The Infinity Gauntlet, that one with the big hand cover. I even think in that, he wasn't even that big when that series came out. That was kind of his comeback. And he was coming back from not being particularly big anything. He was coming back from this story, which was years before. So I think it took a while for Thanos to build up and become the major Marvel player he is now. Oh, there's wrinkles on this copy too. I don't think I've looked through the insides of either of these in a while. But if I had the first thing I'd get CGC'd just for the money, I guess, would be Iron Man 55. And let's see, the other, wrote down a few reasons. Well, a couple other reasons that I decided don't really apply to me. One was for bragging rights. Some people just like to have a nice copy of whatever comic just to say, hey, I got Wolverine 181, isn't that cool? And it's cool. And, that's bragging rights is one reason to get a CGC book or send a CGC book off to be graded. And the other reason that goes hand in hand with that, kind of, is to be right. Which I understand again also. It's fun to go, wow, look at this comic. I bet this is a 9.2 at least. And you send it off and it comes back a 9.2 at least. You're like, hey, I was right. And that's kind of a fun thing. We don't always get a lot of chances to be right in this world. And that's one way to do it. And let's see, the next one I would think is a reason to get a CGC book, which kind of applies to me, as it kind of makes it into an objet d'art, an object of art. sort of one of those little interesting knickknacks you have lying around that's fun to look at. Just nothing big. Now, the difference between an object of art and a piece of art is generally an object of art is just for looking at. It doesn't make you, supposedly when you look at art, it makes you feel something. When you look at an object of art, you just go, wow, isn't that cool? And the first one I'd get CGC'd to make into an object of art would be Palookaville #4. Let me pull this out of its rotting bag. This one's been in that bag for a while. It's not that, looks like that's poly, what that needs to be replaced anyway. This one right here, Palookaville #4, it's got a nice back cover too, was the beginning of the It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken storyline, which is collected in a edition called It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken. It's by the one named cartoonist Seth. And this is one of my favorite comics. When did this come out? 1993. I didn't even jump on this right away. I remember these being out and I didn't get them. And I was actually reading an interview with Seth that made me want to pick this up and made me like this more, because he said one line in the interview. I'll paraphrase because I can't remember the exact wording, but he said something about this comic, and not all things are about the plot. Sometimes it's just about the feeling. And I think that made me look at this differently, and it was something I had never thought of before, since I'm very much a structure person, in that I look for structure in the plots. And, first act, second act, third was always very important to me. And this was the first book that made me realize that things cannot be about the plot. They cannot be about the structure. And of course, the funny thing about that is this book very much is about the plot. It's very much about the plot through a lot of it. The book is about Seth. He's his own lead character. Goes to old bookstores and he gets obsessed with this New Yorker cartoonist throughout the he was a New Yorker cartoonist in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, but he only did a few cartoons. He was a minor cartoonist. No one really knew who. Kato, that was his name. Kato is how he signed his cartoons. And Seth becomes obsessed with him and tracking him down and finding out who he was and what his story was. And in the end, it's kind of anticlimactic because it's not about the plot. That plot really leads him nowhere. It leads him to finding out this guy was a minor cartoonist who, had a life. And he, talked to the guys. I think the guy had passed on and he talked to his mother or wife or something like that, or ex-wife. And there was really no resolution to the plot, because there couldn't be. It's not like he was going to discover this cartoonist was really a superhero who saved the world 7 times. He was going to find out he was a normal person who had a normal life. But it's about his journey finding him, and through this, the feeling. It's about his, the feelings in his life along the way. But yeah, one of my favorites. Palookaville #4, I would definitely get this CGC'd and just have it lying around. Have it lying around the place, pick it up and say, oh, lovely, look at that. And it's funny too, because a lot of people, if you read this and don't know it's not about the plot, it's about the feeling, I've lent this to people and they're vaguely disappointed by it. And I can understand that, because it's so much about the plot kind of at the beginning and in the middle, and then it stops being, that it disappoints some people, but I really like it. One of my favorites. And people were also disappointed to find out that he made up the cartoonist Kato. They were like, oh, he's not a real cartoonist? Oh. But anyway, the next book I would give the object of art treatment would be Finder Talisman, #2 of 3. We'll take this one out of its Mylar. I transferred a lot of my collection over to Mylar in the mid-2000s, but have since run out of money for Mylar, so they're in polys until I get some more. But I I love this. I think I showed this off in my Women on Covers one. Once again, good back. That's the good thing about these indie books. You get art on the front and back cover. So if you get them CGC'd, you got two sides to look at. But this is just, one of my favorite comics, Finder. And this is just one of my favorite little 3-issue story arcs, Talisman. That's all about this young girl who loves books in a world where books are obsolete. And, it's just one of my favorites. And I think this would make a beautiful object of art sitting around, graded at whatever it's graded at. Hopefully it'll be a 9 something. I'm not really a grader, but of course when you have an object of art sitting around, you either want the grade really low or really high, I'd say. But Finder, Talisman, 2 of 3. This is actually Finder issue number 20. So track this one down. Carla Speed McNeil is doing stuff in Dark Horse Presents right now. That's really excellent with Finder. But here are my 2 object of art books. And the next category, the one that applies to me, I would have to say it's close to an object of art, but not quite. I'd call it a conversation starter, a conversation piece. Meaning something like Skate Man. Look, I got 2 issues of it. If you ever find this in the dollar bin, and you can, it's one to pick up. Simply because Neil Adams' Skate Man is just one of the worst comic books ever. And what makes it one of the worst comic books ever is it's nicely drawn. I forget who, I think Neil Adams inked it. I forget, there's not even credits in this. I forget who penciled it, but someone else actually penciled it, but it looks like Neil Adams because he inked it and probably repenciled part. Oh, there's even got Future World in the back of it. So it's like you don't even get a whole comic of Skate Man. And any comic that its splash page and its cover are the same thing, is quality. But it's just one of the strangest, silliest, worst comics ever. It's about a guy who comes back from the Vietnam War and wants to discovers he can roller skate really, really well. So he wants to use it. So his girlfriend or somebody gets killed. Oh no! So he wants to use his roller skating powers for good. So he decides to fight crime as Skate Man. And my favorite observation I've lent this out to many people over the years who are younger than me and have no idea who Skate Man is. And my favorite observation of all time was from my friend and fellow cartoonist Jacob Chabat, who read it and said something I had never noticed before. He was like, Skate Man's arch enemy is the dead end alley, because twice in this comic he accidentally skates down dead-end alleys and was like, oh no, I can't go anywhere. What am I going to do now? I have to fight the villains. So, they even... Skate Man. You just have to get yourself a copy of this. And the 5th and last comic that I would send to CGC. Now, once again, this is a... conversation piece comic, and I thought about it. I was like, what do I have that would make the most interesting conversation piece? So of course immediately popped into my head was the kind of oddball outliers of my collection, which I've got a lot of oddball stuff, but I said, how about a treasury edition? Well, really, I think CGC does treasury editions. I'm not even sure, but that wouldn't be cool to have a giant treasury edition lying about the place as a conversation starter. But not just any treasury edition, because anybody, Superman's, all the good treasury editions that everybody loves, I would want. Treasury editions tend to fall into disrepair because they're they're large, they're bigger than most people don't have any place to store them, so they get beaten up, they get battered. So I would like one of my worst battered treasury editions to get CGC'd, and I have one that is so bad that it makes me... It is The Mighty Avengers. It's Marvel Treasury Edition issue 7. And wait till you see this bad boy, huh? Look at that. We got a chunk missing from the back. It's completely battered. And this is the best part too. It's got electrical tape on the side. I mean, it's got electrical tape on it. How do you grade a Treasury Edition with electrical tape? And I also have to say, they made some really good electrical tape, because I'm pretty sure this was put on in the late 70s. And it is still not coming, and that electrical tape is there. I mean, how does CGC mark up amateur restoration? Is that what you call that? Electrical tape on the spine? And the funny, what this makes this even funnier to me personally was, I didn't notice this till just before I was going to make this video, was this was another book that was my neighbor's growing up. And you know, he gave me a lot of his comics when we were in high school or college or whatever. He just gave me, because he was done collecting comics, and this was one of them. And he used to put his initials on the front of the comics, and I was like, or on the front page, sometimes in pencil, sometimes in pen, obviously, because you see that right there, SW. And I looked at that and I saw the SW, and I was like, oh, that's Stephen Ward. I know that's his, but what is this other mark underneath? I'm like, he marked it twice? And then I realized it said CP. I'm like, SWCP? What the heck is that? And I flashed all the way back to junior high. And he actually went to a different junior high than me. He went to a private one. And I flashed back to the name. I don't know how I remember this all these years later, because I never knew the girl, but her name was Christine Purcell. And that's the girl he had a crush on in junior high. So he put his initials and hers on his book, and I assume that's some sort of heart they're in. So I had a flashback all the way to junior high, and imagining him writing his and her initials on the book as he put electrical tape on the edge. But how would you grade that, huh? A nice bent over piece here. I mean, how many points do you take off for electrical tape on the spine? I am not sure. But anyway, they're the 5 books for Bigeez contest. I'll put a link down below to his channel. He does some good stuff over there. So we got Iron Man 55, Skate Man number 1, Finder number 20, Palookaville number 4, and Marvel Treasury Edition number 7. There you go, peeps.